Welcome to Reddit Aliens. People who suffer from sleep paralysis. What have you seen or heard during your episode? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I've only had sleep paralysis once whenever I was younger, maybe 5 or 6. I was laying in bed and I woke up. The room was dark, blankets were covering me, but I couldn't move. I tried to move my head, but it wouldn't budge, and so I tried to call for my mom, who was beside me. Nothing came out. I'm already freaking out at this point, but I lay there since there's nothing else I can do. Parallel to the foot of the bed was the entrance to the bedroom. It's a hallway. I see a man dressed as Ghostface run past the door. I try to scream for my mom, but I can't talk or move, and so I watch in horror and wait, but nothing happens. Then Ghostface charges from around the corner and jumps on the bed, halfway up my body, lifts his knife up, and before he slams it down, I wake up. This process repeats at least 7 times, and once I finally wake up, I start crying. This was the only time I experienced sleep paralysis, but it's always scared me to death. I have had some bonkers hallucinations, so in no particular order. Felt someone brush my hair back from my face, heard a low, gravelly voice from my ex's closet say, "Come here, sweetheart." Saw a gray, gaunt humanoid creature that slowly got closer to me every time I looked away. Freaked me right the F out when I learned about the rake years later, and it looked pretty much exactly like what I saw. Lots of shadow people, including the Hat Man. Had a dream hallucination that I was floating off of my bed and onto the floor in front of my closet. It felt so real. I could literally feel the stuff on the floor poking into my body. It doesn't scare me quite so badly anymore because I'm aware of what is happening. But growing up, it was terrifying. It tends to happen to me in times of high stress. And weirdly, when I lived in my ex's house, it happened every single time I fell asleep in the basement. I used to get it all the time when I was little, and it terrified me because not knowing anything about sleep paralysis and little about dreams, I assumed it was demons trying to possess my body and torture me. I would see a large dark shadow, sometimes hovering over my bed right above me, sometimes flickering and teleporting to different spots in my room. Sometimes my closet would look like the clothes were standing up on their own in the shape of a person, but just filled with a shadow. Sometimes I wouldn't see anything at all. They would just be black, but I would know I was in the episode because I would feel pins and needles all over my body, like when your foot falls asleep. And then as I tried to move, I would hear laughing coming from all around me. It felt like I was being tickled over every inch of my body. If I tried to make noise or move, the sensations would get worse. The laughing would turn to screaming in my ears. Sometimes there would be threats. If you tell anyone about this, like your parents, I will get them too. Sometimes they were associated with nightmares. I would see terrible things happen to my family or to my own body, but then wake up and still be in my bed. Except I wasn't awake yet. It was a nested nightmare. Those were fun, because as you get up and start to try to move around, something feels off, and then you wake up again, and again a couple of times, until you wake up in bed and can't move, and it feels like you're suffocating, and you have pins and needles all over your body, and the laughing starts. The last bit really effed with my head as a little kid. I didn't always trust when I was awake. I took the threats seriously because I figured they were demons. I couldn't go to anyone for help or they would have gotten too. So the only recourse for a little boy was to seek divine intervention. I read the Bible cover to cover as a small child. It was the first chapter book I read. Don't do that. The Bible is effed up, but I would picture angels or Jesus jousting and fighting in the sky above my house with demons and the devil, fighting to protect my soul. And this comforted me as a little child. Surely demons couldn't beat God if my faith remained strong. But that not knowing when I was awake part really effed with my head. Sometimes when something bad happened, I expected to just be magically teleported back to my bed and feel the pins and needles all over again. It didn't always happen. What did happen though, was every night, sometimes for as long as an hour before I went to bed, I would hear knocking coming from all around me. From the ceilings, from the floors, from the attic, but mainly from the closet. I was almost certain I was awake for the knocking. It didn't feel like the same as a dream, but it was the demons banging on the walls to wear down my resolve before I closed my eyes to try to take over my body. I would pray the entire time. As I got older, I learned about sleep paralysis, realized I experienced it. It demystified it for me, and I was no longer afraid. But the knocking, I couldn't shake that. I was so sure I was awake, and it didn't line up with other parts of sleep paralysis. Well, I found out what that was in college. After a night of flirting, I took a girl back to my dorm. While we were having sex, the bed would knock against the wall in a rhythmic fashion, a familiar rhythmic fashion. I realized in that moment what the knocking was. I was listening to my parents have sex, almost every night. Praying the entire time, demons would have been less traumatic. I still finished like a champ, but I needed alone time afterwards. A few times as an adult I've had sleep paralysis, but nightmares and the feeling no longer unsettles me. So what could be more frightening than sleep paralysis? Perhaps this poster's realization of what that knocking sound really was. I have some fun ones. I was sleeping on the back of my couch and opened my eyes to see a tall, thin black humanoid figure, and before I could even tell myself it wasn't real, it was far from my first rodeo. It said, "You're not asleep," in a mocking tone, at which point I woke up by sitting straight up. The last one I had was because I was pushed against the wall in my building by a homeless man. I was lying on my side facing the wall, and I heard my apartment door slam open and felt my cat run away off my mattress. I knew it was him. I told myself, just pretend to be asleep, and maybe he'll leave you alone. I felt someone kneel down behind my back, at which point I was like, what are you thinking? You have to fight for your life right now. And I woke up whipping myself around. Obviously, no one was actually there. I think the scariest one was when I was younger. I had my eyes shut, but I heard the closet door open so violently it hit the wall, and sort of felt or was aware of a huge shape moving in like one stride across the room to my bed. I opened my eyes, and my mother was smiling down at me, but not like a nice smile. I was used to this by now, and was like, "You're not real," to myself. It then morphed into my grandma, looking down at me the same way, and then I woke up. Most of my episodes are honestly really boring, and because I rolled over onto my back, they're just me feeling like I can't breathe until I can move one of my feet to kick myself awake. It used to scare me more because I thought I was suffocating, but now it's just annoying. It's hard to wake up from them without that surge of adrenaline and fear. The most annoying part is having to sit up and wake up enough that I don't immediately just go back into the state. I've only had it happen a handful of times throughout my life, but here they are in order of earliest to most recent. 1. Fell asleep on the couch as a young child, and suddenly felt awake in the middle of the night, unable to move. I could see the large plant we had rustling out of the corner of my eye, and knew that the thing in the bush was my childhood monster, a troll. There was this old children's fairy tale my grandmother used to read to me from, and the story of the 3 billy goats gruff had this red-eyed skeleton-looking troll that lived under the bridge. I believed he was in the plant trying to sneak up on me, but I couldn't call for help. 2. Several years back, I remember being awake asleep. I felt this sense of impending doom, as though something bad was going to happen if I didn't make myself move. I tried to focus all of my energy into moving, but couldn't. And I remember thinking, if I could just scream, someone could come and help me, or save me from what was coming. I eventually forced up a loud scream, which I had believed to all be part of a dream. The next day my neighbors had asked about the scream in the middle of the night, if I had heard it. 3. I was drifting off to sleep a few weeks ago. I was right at that stage between sleeping and still being awake. I suddenly was overcome by this fear that something was coming, and I could hear banging around downstairs. I couldn't move to get out of the bed or investigate the noise. I felt a lot of fear and forced myself to wake up completely with what felt like great mental effort. Even after being awake for a moment, I wanted to be sure I was really awake, so I did the cliche thing and pinched myself. When I was younger, it would be an impending feeling of doom that would build until I was able to move and break the paralysis. Later in life, when me and my husband had started dating and staying at each other's places, I had a sleep paralysis episode where I saw a shadow person lunge for my husband. We were in my room, sleeping in my bed, and I screamed, and in my mind attempted to jump in front to protect him. For years, when we were both struggling with addiction, I would have such bad night terrors I'd cry, whimper, scream in my sleep, and as soon as he'd hear me, he'd always wake me up. Now we're both clean, and it's been years since I've had a wake me up bad night terror or sleep paralysis episode. Happened to me quite a bit that I don't really get scared anymore. Here are some notable ones that stick to me. Woke up and saw some blue transparent mass appearing near my dimmed nightlight. It then morphing into a disembodied head and started moving closer and closer to my face. I got pretty scared and tensed up. I just closed my eyes and went back to sleep. I woke up lying on my back, can't move. Saw some black figure sitting holding its knees near my nightstand across my bed in my peripheral. Kept struggling and finally was able to move. The figure disappeared when I was able to turn my head to look. Pro tip, try wriggling your small limbs, fingers, or toes. It usually helps me to break free faster, before the weird stuff happens. My brain chemicals are a bit effed. Sometimes it's sleep paralysis where I wake up but can't move. Thankfully, it doesn't cause hallucinations. On the other side of the spectrum, I also sleepwalk. I hide my keys and switch the stove off at the trip switch at night because I have gone out of the house and woke up outside trying to unlock my car. I've also tried to cook in my sleep. The last time I tried to cook in my sleep, I woke up with a pan on the stove containing raw rice, pizza crusts from supper, and a couple of spoons of sugar. The plate was switched on, and I would have burnt the house down if I hadn't switched it off at the trip switch before going to bed. It usually happens when I'm really stressed out, when I'm having depressive or manic episode, or when I go on trips and have to sleep in a strange bed. Sounds like this person took cooking lessons from my ex. I get them all the time. I realized I get them if I fall asleep doing something like playing a video game or watching TV. I know I'm about to get them because I always have a lucid dream. That's when I'm like, crap, I'm about to get sleep paralysis. I've had them since I was a kid. So many I've lost count, honestly. At first I was scared shitless, but now it's just more of an annoyance. I used to see shadowy figures, but now not so much. It's the damp breathing that's really annoying now. It's hard as hell to breathe. I found it best just to go back to sleep. It only happened to me once, but I'll share it, lol. I was about 11 or so I woke up in the middle of the night for some reason. In the corner of my eye, I could see a figure standing by my closet. I tried blinking, but he was still there, still as a rock. Needless to say, I was scared shitless. I tried closing my eyes for like 5 seconds, and as soon as I opened my eyes, he was right in front of me. It was like a still image in front of my face. It was a man with a top hat. He looked pretty old and was grinning straight at me. I'm trying to blink again, but to no avail. He was still there. After like 5 seconds, he was gone. I swear I could have pissed myself. I was so scared I didn't even think about moving, lol. When I was a freshman in high school, I had 3 episodes in one night. The first was just my wall, and the second one was a blurry figure moving closer as my eyes twitched. Then the last one was a face that burned into my memory. It looked like eyeless Jack, but more pale and less defined face. The eye sockets were inhumanly large. Even though it didn't have much of a face, I could tell it was smiling at me, laughing. I only realized years later that I'd actually seen something in one particular episode of sleep paralysis. I usually don't see anything. Saw a brightly lit doorway and a silhouette standing in it or behind it. At the time, I thought it was my own door and a family member there. However, it was on the right side of the room and my door is on the left. I get that it's not much compared to some of these stories, but I found it a bit weird that this was the one occurrence of paralysis where I saw something. And I've had it maybe 8 or 9 times through my life. I've had sleep paralysis a few times, and what it feels like is you want to scream for help as a shadowy figure approaches you with what you feel like intent to kill you. Sometimes it's weapons, other times it's unarmed and whispering things, making things happen around you, but still terrifying. You try to move or speak anything really, and it just doesn't happen. It's also really hard to keep telling yourself, this isn't real. They're not real, They can't do anything to you, it's in your head, because you want to believe your eyes. It got so bad that I took it and went back into boxing after my MMA years, in hope that if it were real, I could fight back. It may be a ghost or whatever, but I'm still going to try to punch it. If you want to know what a sleep paralysis demon looks like, look up Elden Ring Cemetery Shade. So I took your advice and looked up that Elden Ring thing, and yeah, that's pretty scary, so thanks for sharing. I've never really had visual hallucinations, but I have heard and felt things. It mostly happens when I'm really tired and end up stuck transitioning to or from sleep. My body feels extremely heavy, and it takes all my willpower just to breathe or move a limb a tiny bit. I'm stuck in a suffocating state, unable to move, but it isn't exactly scary for some reason. The first time I had it, I was having a dream, became lucid, and said to myself, whatever I think of first will happen. So of course my mind goes straight for sleep paralysis. Everything in the dream swirled into darkness like a whirlpool, and I awoke to myself on my stomach, unable to move. I heard wind or water rushing in my ears and the feeling of rocking on a boat. Something pushed my side over, like it was trying to dump me off of my bed. I could feel myself moving. I probably wasn't. I couldn't see anything out of my eyes, but I almost got a sort of daydream vision looking down on me in the third person. I couldn't see the normal way. Rather, I could comprehend my surroundings as if I were seeing through my imagination, if that makes any sense. I ended up going back into a dream state where I saw my brother in my grandparents' old living room, but just the living room, as everything else was a black void. I told him how I went lucid and then had sleep paralysis. After that, I actually woke up for real and said to myself, that was weird.